Okay, so continuing the Pokemon train, for me at least, my next game is Pokemon Soul Silver. Well, that's the version I played. So
Uh-huh.
Heart Gold and Soul Silver are very good examples of what I think are good remakes. It's still faithful to the original Gold and Silver. It has some of the additional content provided in Pokemon Crystal, and it has the quality of life changes added in both generations 3 and 4 of the mainline Pokemon games. So I'm still going back and forth as to whether I want to do a video on remakes in generals because people's expectations of them are kind of all over the place. Yeah, a good example being RE2 and 2 Remake, since they're two vastly different experiences. Whereas you have something like Pokemon Gold and Silver and Heart Gold and Soul Silver, where it's almost a one-to-one recreation of the original game, just with some modernization and some additional content that was not in the original games. This cat.
He's such a cute kitty.
So back to the main topic at hand. So with Heart Gold and Soul Silver, I would say even if you're not there to play the original Gold, Silver, and Crystal, you can still play this newer version and you would have not the exact same experience as those who play the original, but something pretty similar.
Hmm.
And I would like to think that's, something that a good remake does is be able to provide that initial experience that was first released so many years ago. Like I said, I'm still going back and forth if I want to do a video on just remakes in general. So I think there's much more I would have to say in that said video whenever I do get around to that.
I think that that would be a very good discussion video to have because, like you said, just everybody's expectations on remakes, it's all over the damn place, especially with this current climate of Capcom, not necessarily them specifically, but it almost feels like they're spearheading the whole remake movement. Like they're really riding that train because, like, even with just their emphasis on the Resident Evil franchise, like that's literally what they've been doing all along, and it really feels like with these modern ones, it's kind of dividing people on what exactly remakes either should be versus what they currently are right now. And so I think that that video, I feel like somebody should definitely shed light on their overall opinions on, the difference between remakes and then just overall changing
Yeah,
the like the
reimaginings.
original. There you go. There you go.
Yeah,
It's not a
because
reboot.
yeah, because that's
It's
because
definitely not a reboot, but it's a reimagining for sure.
so just for an example, that's my big gripe with Final Fantasy VII remake, quote unquote. It's not a remake; it's a reimagining.
It definitely is. I mean, I have not even like I haven't played the original game myself because honestly, at the time, when you first got me into the series, I didn't have access to it on my PS3 just yet. But I just decided to go ahead and watch a full playthrough of it, like no commentary, but literally somebody who went ahead and did 100% of that game. I still remember it pretty well. But then I go over to like watch a couple of my acquaintances and one of my close friends like actually play through the game, and I'm just like, wait, what? What's going on here? What is all this additional stuff? Wait, did they change this?
Yes.
Oh my god! How is this is here? How is this going to change everything from the story moving forward? Like I was literally having these reactions, and I'm just like, is this an actual remake or Square? What exactly are you giving us here? Like that's my overall reaction to like reimaginings and they pass it off as remakes. It's like, no, it's not what a remake is supposed to be. But I mean, I guess I guess I'm one of the few people that is gonna stand by the overall opinion that it needs to provide that, you know, what you said, that initial experience, not necessarily go ahead and change for the sake of being able to tell a new story. I wanted to do that, I mean, for all intents and purposes, either reboot it or call it a reimagining of the OG game.
All right. So then, shall we move on to your number? Yeah, 21.
Oh boy. So, I've made it to well, this is technically the second to last of the Resident Evils that I have on my list, but this one I feel like is going to be very, very weird for people to see on my top 25 games in general, or pretty much in anybody's top 25 games. And I kind of have to admit, I'm a little nervous to say this, but at the same time, I fervently defend my including this as an entry on this list overall. However, I'm now officially going to go on record and say that Resident Evil 6 is on my list for top 25 games of all time for me.
For you.
Yes,
Really
for me.
now?
Yes.
Really? All
Yes.
right.
The
Care to
one game
care
the
to
one game
educate us?
Okay, the one game in this series that it seems that everybody it can almost universally agree is the most hated game in this entire franchise. Well, guess what? I'm not one of them. I freaking love this game. And I'm not saying that because, you know, like, oh, this is exactly what Resident Evil, you know, should be or anything like that. I'm not saying that, you know, the entirety of the Resident Evil formula should be changed over to having like what we got, like the overall themes, the overall presentation and such like I'm not necessarily calling for everything to change to be an exact like gameplay style to what Resident Evil 6 is. What I'm saying overall is that this game was the most fun Resident Evil game to play because specifically of its gameplay mechanics. Not its story, not the overall Michael Bay-esque presentation of this of like, you know, all these explosions and whatnot that everybody absolutely hated when this game came out. No, no, no. I literally include this on this list because I absolutely thought it was phenomenal how Capcom pulled off the melee combat in this game, and the overall integration of multiple Resident Evil characters coming together to finally create some kind of a climax within this overall franchise. I loved it for that. Not to mention the fact that because of this gameplay, the Mercenaries mode, the most fun Mercenaries mode I've ever played up until that point. I still haven't gotten my hands on playing Resident Evil 4 Remakes Mercenaries. I will throw that out there, but honestly, considering how many playthroughs I've done so far of RE4 Remake, it almost feels like an exact like almost beat for beat gameplay recreation of what Resident Evil 6 had in the first place.
What you're saying is that RE4 Remake takes a lot of inspiration from RE6. Am I interpreting that correctly?
Without a single doubt in my mind, yes. There were plenty of people on Reddit that posted like comparison pictures of the combat that was shown to us in the Resident Evil 4 demo over to showing us combat of, you know, like playing Leon in Mercenaries mode, like literally recreating almost the exact same movesets, like almost beat for beat. They look the same. you can just be able to do a whole lot more in Resident Evil 6 than what is given to you in Resident Evil 4 Remake. Like it's a little bit weird, but Capcom, they don't give you the most well-rounded parry system that they do in Resident Evil 6, because in Resident Evil 6, literally you can be able to redirect enemy, like if a zombie that's, I don't know, say is wielding like a freaking golf club or is like wielding like an axe or something, and they literally swing it at you. You literally have the ability to either redirect that move and kill them with it, or you can literally redirect that move to make them go further away from you so that you can then run away from the danger. Here in Resident Evil 4 Remake, the parry system, it's more so to just make like the enemy attacks not hit you so that you can then go in for the kill. Or, just melee them with the Leon's already very famous powerful kicks and such that um again, they're basically recreations of what we get over in Resident Evil 6. And if people really don't want to see them as like absolute like beat for beat recreations, then at the very least they cannot deny that the movesets, that the overall fluidity of the combat is directly inspired by what we have over in Resident Evil 6. But because it's a Resident Evil 4 remake, people are a lot more inclined to be more open to it than what we have in number 6, simply because there's the whole overall stigma surrounding the game, because it's such an easy game to diss nowadays, or just as it was back then. And that's really something that I feel like people really need to get out of the overall mindset is, honestly, I firmly believe that sooner or later people are actually going to start going back over to Resident Evil 6 and realize, okay, maybe this game has its flaws, because there are definitely a lot of sections within the story of Resident Evil 6 that were definitely way too much. They were way too on the overall Michael Bay sort of presentation of like sort of action movie hero sort of sequences and such. Like, I'm not going to deny that there were definitely a lot of segments within Chris Redfield's campaign, within Jake Mueller's campaign, and it's more so where Leon and Ada's are very mellowed out and a lot more in line with the overall Resident Evil vision of like survival horror, but somewhat balanced with like action oriented gameplay. But in those two characters' campaigns, that's where we have a lot more of like the ridiculousness that people really love to diss on for Resident Evil 6. That that is something I'm not going to deny. Sure, like that's definitely a flaw that Capcom had. And I think this was something that I have to say was the weirdest choice that Capcom never made. But literally, the overall mindset that the director had for this game was to be able to attract people from the freaking Call of Duty franchise to come over into Resident Evil. So they made it as bombastic as possible with gameplay that they felt like would still be easier than the, I guess, limiting nature that we got from the overall like tankish controls of Resident Evil's 4, 5, and even from the OGs previously.
Okay, I think that explains a lot of the Michael Bay shenanigans that went in that you mentioned.
Exactly. Like that bit of trivia, I was like, are you freaking kidding me? You literally decided to go ahead and attract an entire fan base that has, for all intents and purposes, seemingly no interest in coming over to this franchise. And in the end, that overall creative direction was what led to this game being called the absolute worst in the series, which, again, let's be real, it's not the worst. That honor goes over to Survivor. That was one of the worst implemented rail shooter like gameplay that anybody has ever seen in their life. But I mean, that's an obscure title that nobody knows about. So on to this, a main title like Resident Evil 6 we go. But like I said, I think that Resident Evil 6 of every single game in this franchise was just the most fun to play. The gameplay was especially what made it a lot of fun. And plus, if you think about it, realistically speaking, at this point in the overall series, because the game takes place around December 2012 to, I want to say, June or July of 2013, canonically speaking, within that universe. Every major player within the Resident Evil franchise has had basically a decade or more already having had experience fighting against bioorganic weaponry. Realistically, you can't expect them to hold back their overall like tactical move sets just for the sake of being able to maintain that constrictive gameplay from the OG games so that it can be scary and such.
Because by this point, narratively speaking, the zombie apocalypse, that's just their daily life for them. They're kind of,
Exactly.
I wouldn't say that they're used to it, but maybe they've gone a bit somewhat numb to it.
You can definitely say that because even obviously I'm not going to give like, spoilers or anything, but there were definitely hints throughout the story where you can see characters like, let's say Ada, Chris, and definitely Leon, where they're like they're basically, looking at, new enemies and being and essentially telling like the younger generation, like, don't worry, you get used to this. And I'm like, bro, you can literally hear it in their voice. Like they are so done with this crap, but they know how to handle themselves. That's why I absolutely love that you can literally be able to not only move as you are like aiming and such, which thank goodness they did away with that from that tank control, but also the fact that as you are aiming, you can literally press a button to roll forward, to jump back, to roll off from side to side so that you can avoid incoming attacks. And you also have the parry system where you can either redirect zombies to go away from you or Juavo, or you can use their attacks against them, either incapacitating them or officially killing them. This game had literally everything that you could possibly imagine for field agents like these people to properly fight back against BOW threats. And it made for some excellent and fun and engaging immersion to the combat. And that's why I loved it so much. That's why I spent hundreds of hours in mercenaries mode because I was just that addicted to it. Gosh, I really wish that I could be able to discuss the story in detail because truth be told, even when the game came out and people absolutely did not like the main villain and such because apparently the dude was like very cliche and motivations were just like, bro, really? I'm just gonna say this, just kind of like as a tease for the things that you might discover if any of you like decide to actually like go back into Resident Evil 6 to, I guess, replay it for the story. If you actually go in to find the serpent emblems that give you access to like additional files that for some reason they don't let you read within the game, you have to actually go back into you have to actually go back into a, I guess, secrets menu of sorts. If you read the stuff, it puts into perspective just how I really I really wish I could say this properly, but it puts into perspective just how unbelievably messed up and grotesque certain people's motivations can be that essentially lead to the the destruction of so many people's lives. Because I remember the last time that I played Resident Evil 6 on live stream with Kitty, we really went into a discussion with it. We really talked about how as a climax for the overall franchise, how they Capcom basically needed to have a huge event that essentially affects the entire world. Because at this point within the franchise, there'd only ever been like like events, like isolated events that happen, like let's say in Raccoon City or let's say in like Rule Spain for Resident Evil 4 or like Rockford Island for, Code Veronica. At this point, the franchise really needed to show what happens when you have a BOW threat that affects multiple countries all at once. And I think in that regard for the story, RE6 really actually succeeds because it shows just how much viral weaponry can really mess up and destabilize the world. And I genuinely think that that was a good direction because when you establish just how big something can get and you're able to resolve it in a manner that is technically speaking satisfactory, that's when you can be able to go back and focus on the smaller things, which is essentially what Capcom did with Resident Evil's 7 moving forward.
If 6 is like the big climax and even a pseudo conclusion, how does that lead into 7 and 8 or Village?
7 and 8, I would say, is more of like a introduction for a new character and a new threat. Because here, okay, this feels like it's almost opening a new can of worms, honestly, for a discussion. But Capcom has this weird tendency to. I feel like everybody almost knows at this point. They have a tendency to introduce new characters and new organizations for like one game when it's kind of implied that they have their hands in basically a little bit of everything. They showed us something like that with Resident Evil 6 and it never got a proper conclusion. So we assumed that for the next game, Resident Evil 7, that's basically what they would end up touching upon. But no, they go with an entirely new organization that is wholly different from the threat that we have in RE6. So I think that in their haste to kind of disassociate from all of the hate that Resident Evil 6 has essentially gotten, they really wanted to tell a new, smaller threat with a new character that's never been shown in the franchise, with a new um, enemy organization that's never been alluded to in the franchise. And they thought this would be the proper way to be able to like get people reinvested in the franchise, and a lot of people will end up saying yes, Resident Evil 7 saved the franchise. I wholly disagree with that opinion, but it still succeeded regardless. It brought people back. They were able to tell a new story with the elements that were introduced in RE7 so that then they could be able to use that moving forward. I get the feeling that that's the reason for why they're remaking these games is because they want to be able to go back and fix whatever plot holes that they had so that they can officially tie that all into what we have with RE7. That's my prediction overall for the franchise that Capcom is trying to do. And I can't entirely say I'm liking it just because that means at that point, Capcom really has no idea what to do with their franchise. They're putting in way too many ideas into this boiling pot and just seeing how the overall final dish is going to turn out.
Well, let's also not forget that the original developers for RE2, 3, and 4, chances are not all of them came back for the remake.
No, they didn't. As we've seen with the director of Resident Evil 4, he went on to make his own studio, I believe. What was it? It's not ID software. It's Tango, I think. They're under the direction of Bethesda. They're the studio that made The Evil Within.
Oh, okay.
So after he left, oh goodness, I feel so bad for forgetting but yeah, like the dude literally went on to create a new studio, but he stayed making some more survival horror, and his latest project after he left was The Evil Within that was released in 2014. And honestly, that turned out to be pretty good for, coming back over to the survival horror genre. And that was a game that I am planning to, weave over to live stream sometime in the future because honestly, I don't think that that game gets enough recognition and such.
I feel like that's a game more people more know more so by name rather than they've actually played.
Yeah, I feel like that has to be the case too. And just to take a little bit of time to, I guess, show some appreciation for a game, Shinji Mikami, go ahead, support the studio, check out the Evil Within 1, because Evil Within 2 after that, definitely an improvement. Like, dagnabbit, like I can definitely see something wonderful was born from the messed up mind of Shinji Mikami. Like, oh my god, it actually plays incredibly well, and I very, very much love it. But honestly, after he left, you can really tell. You can really tell that the overall emphasis or being able to at the very least like tell proper survival horror, like the proper scares and such, like it did kind of diminish after he left. You can definitely feel it at a certain point for sure. Anyway, I could be able to go on gushing more and more about Resident Evil 6, but for now, I believe I've gotten my main points across with it. So,
All right.
what's next on our list?
What's next on my list? So, I'm going to do what you did for Dead Space. Yeah, so for you, Dead Space, you pretty much kind of viewed all the games as relatively equal. So therefore, you just kind of like bundled them up into, well, a one slot on the list. I'm going to do the same with Splatoon.
Ah,
So I played all three Splatoon games, and they are all great. They're all a lot of fun, but I do feel like there's not one that is inherently better than the other. And I think that's because the core gameplay by itself is already just a lot of fun.
I have to wonder because I've only ever like seen gameplay, but the thing is, I have no idea what exactly is going on. What is the overall objective when you play a game of Splatoon?
So that's going to come down to the different game modes. So the casual game mode Turf War, that is pretty much spray as much ink as possible, and the one with the most ink, the one that has the most or most abundant in your color, you win. And then there's some other game modes like trying to remember. Like Splat Zones. Splat Zones is like a more condensed and even a more fair version of Turf Wars, where you just need to spray ink in like a certain spot on a map, usually a giant square or giant rectangle, and you just need to claim it and keep it as your point for X amount of time. Uh, Similar to the King of the Hill maps in Overwatch and Team Fortress.
Oh,
There's also payload maps. And then 2 and 3 also brought us this kind of like a basketball-esque game mode, Clam Blitz. That's what it's called. Yeah, no, nobody likes it.
how come?
Let's just say once you gather a certain number of clams, not only I'm pretty sure you slow down because of the weight of said clams, but also you just start glowing very bright, and it's just a giant signal for the enemy to just, hey, let's go get that person because they're kind of a threat.
Oh boy.
And then there's also Rainmaker, which it's like payload maps, but instead of escorting a payload, you're actually escorting like this trophy that's also a very strong weapon, and it could shoot projectiles that could potentially one shot the enemy.
Jesus.
Yeah, as chaotic as Splatoon is, it's actually, well, one, it is a lot of fun, and two, it's not it. I would. It's definitely not turn your brain off and just go shoot everywhere. No, there is some amount of thinking you need to do before you take said action.
So it's a lot more methodical than I thought it was going to be honest.
Yes, very much.
Oh my goodness. That really blew my expectations out of the water. Because, like I said, like I've never played Splatoon ever. I've only ever seen like gameplay from like freaking Watch Mojo lists or maybe, certain creators on YouTube that like do analysis videos here and there and such. But honestly, like I know nothing about this overall series. I didn't even know just the fact that there were even like three Splatoon games to begin with. Like the heck? I
Yeah,
thought that this was something that just came out like maybe a few years ago, but no, there was a lot more to this than I imagined there to be, and I was quite surprised.
I will say the world building is actually my favorite thing. Yes, this game does have lore,
That's
and
what like oh my god. What the heck? I literally thought that this was nothing more than a multiplayer game, and you're telling me there's a story to this?
oh yeah, all three games have a story mode, and
I didn't
there's
know
a
that.
lot of world building. So the main premise for all three games, for the world building wise, is that I don't think it's ever explained, but somehow humans disappear, probably went extinct, and then aquatic life took over. And the squids, the inklings, they find all this human technology and they decide to repurpose it into their ink guns. And that's why their weapons are arranged from water guns to hair dryers and buckets. Even one of them is like a miniature washing machine. And in Splatoon 3, we got like these sniper rifle mechanical pencils. Yeah, it's very creative. They take mundane everyday objects and they turn it into a weapon.
Okay, look. Just look. Yes, that is very fascinating. It really is. Because I've never heard of what was it you said? Sniper rifle mechanical pencils?
Yeah,
The heck?
yeah,
But then when you started mentioning that it's basically implied that all human life is gone and aquatic life basically came onto land, like some evolution here.
yeah. Did you know that
I
Nintendo is for kids? Don't mind the very dark and implied subject matter.
oh no, oh no, it's just totally for kids.
I mean, Majora's Mask is for kids.
Oh God, oh
Don't
good
ask me
God.
how, but it is.
Good gracious. Dude, this is supremely grim. Oh my
Oh, I can
gosh.
make it
I was
worse.
not expecting.
I can I can make it worse. Oh,
Oh
so
no.
one of the main NPCs, he's the referee for all the multiplayer modes. I think his name was Judd. He's a cat, and when you learn his backstory, you find out that his human master, yeah, his human master died, but he kept his pet cat cryogenically frozen so that one day he could continue living on. He could just continue living.
Dude just doomed that cat to live in perpetuity?
No. Okay, no. Not quite, not quite. So in Splatoon 2, that was later expanded because a second cat comes into the picture. Who is this
Oh
cat?
Lord.
This cat is now his is a genetic clone of him.
Oh, for frick's sake.
At least he has somebody to meow with.
Yeah, he can meow with himself. Dude, okay, the cat is literally looking into a mirror every single day and calling that company. Oh, I feel so bad for this cat.
So yeah, you want to split? You want to go play some Splatoon?
I'm a whole lot more curious for it now, yes. I need to see this for myself. I really do wanna see this for myself because like I said, I've never played Splatoon before, I've heard of it, I've seen gameplay for it, but I legitimately thought it would be nothing more than just a fun, multiplayer game that, kids and adults can be able to enjoy. I never would have expected a story that has such a grim implication on the overall fate of humanity
Yeah.
and the rise of aquatic life on land. You it again, it's one of those things where you just look at it face value and be like, "Oh, it's just gonna be, something wacky and fun and such." No, there's a reason for why they've gotten to this point, and how they do it is not pretty.
Okay, that initial mindset or that initial reaction you just described, I feel like that's something your brother would say.
Definitely, for sure. But now that you've helped me to open my eyes to, um, understanding a little bit more of it, that's now I wanna know. I really, really, really do.
All right, and we are going to move on from aquatic life to. Do we got any more zombies on your list, or do we got something else?
We have something else.
All right.
Okay, so I don't know how you're gonna type this into the, uh, the thing so that you could be able to pull up an image, but I'm fairly certain that it's literally just called The Thing.
The Thing.
Yes, The Thing. More specifically, the thing that I am referring to is a video game sequel approved by Fox and approved by the director himself, a sequel to the remake, John Carpenter's 1981 remake of The Thing. I
Uh.
can I cannot tell you just how much I freaking love this game.
Oh, yep, it's on here.
It is.
Yeah.
Hallelujah. Another gem that has not been forgotten.
All
Thank you.
right, this is a game I had no clue existed, let alone that it's a sequel to a remake to a well-known. I don't know how well-known it is to a known
Oh,
horror movie.
yes.
Please
I'm pretty sure
explain.
that the okay, I'm pretty sure that the original came out sometime in the 50s, I wanna say, but the 80s version of it was the one that basically cemented itself as one of the absolute greatest uses of practical effects in horror movies of all time. People literally were so unbelievably grossed out by the special effects used in this movie, but the way that the production was able to really portray the overall grotesque and gory nature of transformations within the movie was just freaking legendary, dude. Like every so often, me and my family will go back to like watch this because it's literally like one of our favorite scary movies out there. It's not necessarily scary, it's just gross to look at, but the presentation, the overall like this is literally Among Us. Among Us originated from this. You know the whole like
Yeah, the
the thing.
secret killer amongst a group of players.
It's not even that. That secret killer is an alien. The overall premise of the thing from the movie is that an alien at one point long ago, it is implied either 100,000 years ago or maybe slightly over 100,000 years ago, crash landed onto Earth. And because it crash landed in the Antarctic, it's literally been just there in the ice for it basically felt like eons at that point. Until one day, a Swedish exploration team unearthed it. I believe that the the events of the Swedish team itself, that's a prequel movie that came out, I want to say in 2011. I personally didn't really like it, but I mean, it explains the transition over to the events of the 1981 film. And 1981 film shows the aftermath. What happens when that alien infiltrates yet another base, and now it is up to that team to determine, okay, which one of us is the alien, and what do we got to do in order to stop it? And from the events of that movie, because to be perfectly honest, when that movie came out, it ended on one hell of a mystery. It ended on a hell of a cliffhanger. Like, it was satisfactory from like a story standpoint, and the way that like it concludes, like you just don't know whether or not the alien is still alive or whether or not like they successfully dispatched of it. It's the execution of the overall start to finish of the secrecy, the overall intrigue, the lore, everything about this movie was just so well done. But the way that it ends, you literally don't know what conclusion to come to until years later when Midway came out and essentially helped to publish this thing. And we have a Fox approved, John Carpenter approved sequel for the movie. And let me tell you, the gameplay for this was so freaking tense, dude. I cannot tell you just how many times I was legitimately scared out of my mind on what direction to take, like my actions, whether or not I'm gonna either like completely be alone in my endeavor to go from start to finish of the game, or if I am going to surround myself with people that could potentially be the thing itself. Who knows? Because gameplay speaking, one of the things that truly fascinated me the most about is the fact that you can pick up survivors along the way. You play as a rescue team that comes in to investigate the distress signals from the team that was affected in the movie. This rescue team, they get split up because the Antarctic is one hell of an unforgiving environment, and their investigations lead them like basically all over the damn place, and you have to reunite, you have to find a way off, you have to do whatever it is to, move the story forward. I don't want to give too many spoilers away just because, again, the way that the story plays out for the game specifically, good stuff. Very good stuff. But it's the gameplay itself that really attracted me the most to it. As you find survivors along the way, whether they be from separate teams around the Antarctic or whether they be from your own rescue team, you have to really balance out how loyal they stay to you and how mentally healthy they are. People here are scared. Like, they've seen some stuff that they have never considered they would ever find in the Antarctic. And it's implied that, like they think that they've seen some supernatural stuff when really it's just like it's a bunch of like little variations of the thing itself. Somehow it was able to split its form into like multiple different enemies. But in order for them to stay on your team, in order for them to stay with you throughout like the entire course of like these multiple levels, you have to ensure that you can give them either satisfactory weaponry for them to feel safe, satisfactory amounts of health, good like a good supply of ammo for them. You have to really balance out all of your resources so that your teammates feel like they are safe under your command. And whenever you pull up like your main menu, the UI, to really see the overall state of your teammates, you can see that the game has kind of like animated like their heads to be like, to show that they are calm, to show if they are alert, to show if they are like getting scared, or to show if they are like losing their freaking minds and such. Like they are like on the brink of absolutely just
On
freaking
insanity.
losing it. Exactly. And if somebody's literally on the point of insanity, something as simple as, giving them like a health kit or even something really above and beyond as giving them like a fully stocked flamethrower will be enough to get them to calm down because then that means they'll be able to properly defend themselves. There were definitely times in which I had nothing on me. But I was more than willing to be able to like go through without any weapons, without any health kits whatsoever, and just give them like my one handgun and like a couple of clips to one person. And they'll, their icons will literally be like, "Are you freaking kidding me? This is all you've got? I don't want to be with you. Screw this. I'm keeping this, but I don't want to be with you." And I'm like, "This is the best I've got, dude. I've got nothing." But your best chance is to come with me. If you stay here in this room that is literally covered, every single wall is literally covered in freaking guts and blood and entrails, like you will die. Why would you lose your sanity in here when you could literally come with me? I will lead you to safety. I will lead us to more places where we could find more weaponry. Come with me. I will do my best to keep you safe. But no, they just keep your stuff and they just stay there. And you have to go out on your own and find stuff for you, find some more stuff for them, and then they'll come with you. I'm literally dealing with the overall difficulties of having to be a leader and having to maintain vigilance of their sanity.
You are the leader and their therapist.
Yeah, apparently my approved therapy is give them a fully stocked assault rifle, a fully stocked a flamethrower, whatever other weaponry there is, and boom, they will feel safe around me and safe enough to endure whatever perils are out there. And there are a lot of perils, a lot of very disgusting aliens out there. And here's the rub. If you think it's very difficult finding resources on the Antarctic from any abandoned outpost out there that might have some supplies for you, if you think having to maintain an entire team for that is difficult, you have to also factor in that any one of the teammates that you pick up along the way could very well have become infected.
And so the disease spreads.
Yes. There is a mechanic within the game where you could be able to like take blood samples and see whether or not that blood sample it has alien tissue in it. Like it's so funny. Like it's like a hypothermic needle. I think you literally just stick it into like any one of your teammates. It does like this weird little like ping sound or something that if it's good, your character will look at it and just shake his head and be like, "No, you're good." You go up to like another character, you poke them with the thing, and you look at it. The freaking glass explodes in front of your face, and they just transform in front of you. They drop all of their weapons. They drop everything, and they transform into like one of the most disgusting creatures ever. And the rest of you and your teammates just have to go after. It's like, oh my god, we literally had an alien in our midst the entire time.
I could just hear and see the Among Us memes coming out of this.
I'm not kidding. This is literally where Among Us came from. I'm pretty certain that there was a core, like a very small but core part of the community for Among Us that recognized, holy crap, this movie was where it started. I mean, obviously not where the whole mystery killer Among Us is it, but more so specifically focused on there's an alien posing as a human who's literally trying to kill us off one by one. This is the movie that popularized that. But none of them point over to the fact that, or rather, I don't think any of them did enough research to see that there was a game, a sequel to this movie that came out. and it is one of the absolute best video game adaptations of a movie ever. Except this time it is an actual certified sequel. It's just so fascinating to see that you can actually go back and learn the fates of what happened to the people in the movie. Like just to see like the overall tie-ins and such, like it's so freaking fantastic. Like even John Carpenter himself, the director, went ahead, played it, and he was like, Jesus Christ, I freaking love this.
That's when you know you did something right.
Exactly. And I was just like, the man loves it. So clearly something was done right. The sound effects, the overall like visual design of this game, the dialogues, like some voice lines for this game were delivered excellently. The trailer for this game, fan freaking tastic. I knew I knew that I had to include one of my absolute favorite games from the PS2 era. Like this game is literally in my freaking like quote unquote trinity of like PS2 games that I absolutely adore. It had to be on this list. And I think that just by describing the gameplay itself, you can understand why I was so fascinated and completely and thoroughly immersed in the overall like quality that went into this game. There you have it.
Well, now we move on to number 23. So, number 23 is a series that I am very fond of. And the most recent release, I think, is the peak. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate.
Ah. I was wondering when this was gonna come up.
Yep. So, I've been playing Smash Bros. Since I was 4 years old, starting with Super Smash Bros. Melee. Played Brawl, played Smash 4, both on Wii U and 3DS. And the thing with Smash Ultimate, and well, it's called Ultimate for a reason. It's pretty much everything we could have essentially wanted, or at least like 99% of it. We got the full cast of roster from all the games with the addition of long-time requested characters, including Sora, Banjo, Ridley, K. Rool. Even the balance and competitive integrity, it's there, even though Nintendo doesn't like esports. But the big question for everyone is what comes after this? It's even to the point where people are asking, is this like the official, like very last Smash Bros. Games that we're ever gonna get? To which I don't think so, because Nintendo does like money. Every game studio likes money.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think whatever we get after Smash Ultimate, I don't know if it can live up to this. Especially with some of the licensing agreements that go on for some of these DLC characters. Like Joker from Persona 5 and even Minecraft Steve, I don't know if we're ever going to see them again. Even Sora from Kingdom Hearts, because they had to go through both Square Enix and Disney for that. But regardless, not only am I just a longtime fan, but I also have been keeping up with the competitive scene, the esports scene, even though, like I already said, Nintendo does not like esports. And throughout both passion and just determination to keep the competitive scene alive, yeah, I consistently watch tournaments, and they are always a joy to watch. Always.
I I have to agree to that. Because interestingly enough, it was a few years ago when the pandemic started, one of my Twitch acquaintances would very often go ahead and just live stream his like online brawls with Super Smash Bros. And I have to admit that was, I want to say, my introduction to the, I guess, the overall like online competitive nature of the game. And I never thought I'd say this, but it is actually very fascinating to like just go ahead and watch how this all plays out. Like there might be like some combos that I don't quite understand, like the complexities of it or how, you know, difficult it is to like pull off and such, but I cannot deny that for somebody as just completely out of the loop when it comes to Super Smash Bros, like it looks like fun and it is fun to watch. And I think that that's pretty freaking awesome, like what they have here presented.
But if you want to get like really good at it, you're gonna have to sink a lot of hours.
Especially with that entire roster of characters that they have, dude.
Yep.
Jesus. Like, you have to like, it really does feel like you have to keep in mind whatever special move sets that each character has, and how like the character that you are playing as, what do they have to be able to counter what they've got? And that's so difficult. Like, how do you keep track of something like that? Because even in League, which I are arguably, well, actually not arguably, they have a larger roster of characters.
Mm-hmm.
Even for something like a lot more downscaled, like with Super Smash Bros. How do you keep track of that stuff?
Either number one, you just do, or number two, you kind of just visually. I would say you kind of visually memorize it, and when you see like the animations play out, you like that just signals, oh yeah, this ability does that. It does X amount of damage. It may potentially have a ton of knockback if you're at this percent of damage.
You know what I was also thinking of?
What is it?
Okay, I'm obviously gonna give like a watered down version of the phrase, but you know how people are like, the more you screw around, the more you're gonna find out?
Actually, yes.
Yeah, that's literally what I was thinking. I can't, like, you won't know what you're dealing with until you find out in the moment. You could literally just barely barely get a grip on, your handle on these things, and you might just go ahead and land what you think is gonna be like the quote unquote killing blow, only to find out, oh crap, they pulled a new one on me, and boom, you go flying off to the other side of the screen in a wonderful explosion.
Yeah.
I've seen that happen way too many times, and I cannot tell you just how funny people's reactions can get when that happens. I love it so much. I'm not gonna love it if that ever happens to me, but seeing when that actually comes into play, like, that's when and that was the moment he knew he messed up.
Honestly, Smash Bros. Is the kind of game where there's so much that goes on. You do learn by just doing things by pure accident.
Oh, yeah, I definitely feel like that if I play it, that's gonna be me.
I'm pretty sure it applies to everyone at some point.
It's all part of the fun, I imagine.
Yep.
But again, like I do feel like I do feel like the biggest reason for why I remember Super Smash Bros. The most is not necessarily because of like the overall format of like being able to play against like Nintendo characters and such, but just the fact that they're able to get so many crossovers from different from like wholly different franchises. Like, what the heck? What did Nintendo have to do in order to get this approved? In order for characters like, I think the very first time that I noticed just how radical these things could get was the announcement of Solid Snake into Super Smash Bros.
So some of these I can explain, although a lot of these are like business deals from decades ago. So for Snake, the Metal Gear before Metal Gear Solid, there was Metal Gear, and that was on the
Mhm.
NES, a Nintendo console. For Joker, oh, okay, so this one is kind of stretching it. Well, the justification for Joker the character is really stretching it, but Atlas, the studio behind Persona and Shin Megami Tensei, they actually produced a lot of games on Nintendo consoles. And just because of that relation of, oh hey, you made games for the 3DS and Nintendo DS, go ahead and add a Joker in.
Because he was like unbelievably popular that year.
Yes,
God, I remember when that came out. I
I
was I
remember
was
the
like, wait, what the
trailer,
frick?
and
Oh, Reggie,
I'm
Reggie, Reggie.
I'm pretty sure they were. I'm pretty sure at the time they were working to get Persona 5 on Switch, but Royal was also in development, so they just decided, okay, find a way to port that version over. I'm
Mhm.
pretty sure that's what was going on in the background.
But yeah, like, dude, all these crossovers, like, I feel like that was the one element that made the game overall, like, very memorable for me, and just Definitely like one of the main appeals for it. I just like I want to know.
Yeah, this was before Fortnite.
Definitely. Definitely. Crossover for the win.
Hold on, how many of these characters have Fortnite skins?
Ooh, that is a good question.
Like I said, in some of our private discussions, I'm kind of surprised we got nothing Final Fantasy related in Fortnite, and yet Smash Bros did it first. I'm waiting for Kingdom Hearts to get into Fortnite, and yet Smash Bros did it first. Could it be that Nintendo is cock blocking Fortnite from getting any more of these crossovers?
You know, I hate to say it, but I wouldn't be surprised. I'd give one hell of a dry laugh being like, ah, ah, ah. But I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, come on, it's Nintendo. They're very proud of this stuff.
Yeah, and let's be real, at times they're probably a bit too proud.
Mm-hmm. God, you hit it right on the head right there.
We can continue the Fortnite speculation another time.
All right.
But now you're number 23.
Okay. My number 23 is the last of my quote unquote trinity of PS2 games. And this is one that I really can't decide if it is my favorite of the three or if I just am gonna just go out and say that I love every one of them equally. Though I want to say, screw it, I'm more for the latter. I love every single one of them equally. But this is a game that is simply known as The Suffering. Again, another title that was published by Midway and developed by Surreal Software.
There's actually quite a few options here. Blue or yellow?
Technically, it is yellow.
Okay, it might be this one. Is it a dude in an electric chair?
Yes.
Okay, then yeah. Okay, with a cover art like that, please explain what am I staring at?
Boy, where to begin with this one. um, this is one of those titles that either nobody will ever talk about or only a handful of people on the internet will actually remember this game. This third person shooter is a gritty, absolutely stylized bloodbath and gore fest of a game. Like, this has to be, for me personally, the game that I would point to as the first example of an action horror game that I have ever been exposed to. Because prior to playing this, the scary games that I had played or had known about were, slow paced and kind of atmospheric games like, say, Resident Evil and Silent Hill. Like, the pacing of those games was meant to be played cautiously and strategically, where you take your time with understanding your surroundings, finding puzzle pieces, navigating your way through tight spaces, and, so on and so forth. But The Suffering was almost none of that. Like, yes, this is a game where the environments presented were so unnerving that you had to explore in a cautious manner. But when things were about to go down, unbridled chaos ensues. And you are treated to some very fast moment to moment gunplay and melee combat that will either leave you feeling like you are barely hanging on a thread or like a beast fighting other monsters. And that is precisely what the developers wanted with this. Like, I remember reading that they hated that this game was being compared to the term survival horror, when in their minds, survival horror is slow. Like, no, absolutely not. That's not what they wanted this game to be. They wanted this to be fast, but as scary as possible. And I remember the first thing that drew me and my siblings to this game was the disturbing box art and the description and the images that we saw like on the back of the game. Because when we loaded up this game and we let like the main menu stay idle, that's when the trailer would play. And we saw a glimpse of what to expect with the combat, the story, the morality system, and the enemies that you would have to fight. And I have to say that above all else, what scared us but also fascinated us the most with the suffering were the enemy designs. And I gotta tell you, I don't think I've seen symbolic enemy designs that were quite as disturbing to me in this game as I've seen in any other game. Like, I use these monster designs as a comparison for later ones that I'll see in other games. Like, am I as disturbed by, I don't know, say, insert horror game here? Did it leave much of an impression on me in as nearly the same manner as the suffering did? And another point that I don't know if people have like ever mentioned when it comes to discussions on this game is like how it never shies away from tackling depictions of prison inmates, the overall like deprivation of the human psyche, and especially in environments that are just enough to make any normal person just lose their minds and feel sick to their stomach for the rest of their lives if, you know, they were ever put into situations like this. And this game does so in a way that I rather genuinely believe is it just wouldn't fly today. Like, it would most likely end up getting canceled. But yet somehow it was something like that that made this game seem so real. You know, like despite the outlandish and supernatural elements that are present in this game. The only other time that I ever saw this game mentioned recently in a rather significant manner was the debut trailer for the Callisto Protocol, because that trailer was almost a scene-by-scene recreation of the intro cutscene sequence of The Suffering. But other than that, this game is kind of almost forgotten by the world.
Alright, since this is my first exposure to this game, and it's by word of mouth and the cover art, not even any gameplay footage, there's not a whole lot I can say or add. Maybe the most that I can say is that if I'm imagining this correct, it's similar. It may have even inspired a game on Steam, and it's a free game. It's called Cry of Fear, and it is one of those horror first-person shooter games where a lot of the environment and enemy designs are inspired by depression and mental health. But I don't think I could say a whole lot more beyond that. All right, second to last on this list is Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3.
Bro.
I need to say
Bro.
that I am not good at this game. I am pretty awful at it. But I cannot deny this is the game that really kicked my interest in esports. I remember browsing through YouTube in 2011, and out of nowhere on my feed was Evo 2011. Or was it 2012? Shoot. Actually, it might have been 2000. Yeah, no, it was 2012. Evo 2012, the champion, the final grand finals, Filipino champ versus Infront. This is when I learned that competitive video games are a thing, and I was fascinated. And it also helped that Marvel vs. Capcom is just, it's a fairly recognizable crossover franchise. Because even before Marvel vs. Capcom 3, I do remember playing Marvel vs. Capcom 2, the PS2 port, back in like 2006 or something. I was already familiar with both the Marvel characters and the Capcom characters. Although I will say that Marvel 3 added some new additions, including Beautiful Joe, Dante and Virgil, and Dormammu. So there was a few new faces for both the franchise and just for me as an outsider coming in. And I will also say that the overall art style and like the font, the colors, the sound design, this game does a lot of it very, very well. It gives off that very comic book kind of look and feel to it. You especially see it in the Marvel characters because, well, it's Marvel. But as for the Capcom characters, I think you mainly see it in my opinion, you mainly see it in like Dante, with like the dark black streaks going on throughout his cloak, and even like the sides of his sword Rebellion.
Yes, definitely.
But I also need to address the elephant in the room. That balance wise, this game is absolutely atrocious. In fact, I would compare it to something like Super Smash Bros. Melee, where it is so imbalanced, you kind of learn to be appreciative of all the jank that goes on in it. Virgil is the prime example. The dude can just do everything. He has infinite loops, he has a single sword swing that covers like a third of the screen. It can even freaking just eliminate projectiles. His overall frame data is just stupid fast.
Of course.
Yeah, I think there's a reason why Virgil's never going to come back to this game. But to summarize my admiration for Marvel 3, it's got characters that I'm familiar with and both enjoy. It has a art style that I think is very underappreciated, and it is the game that introduced me to the world of esports, which is something that I still enjoy watching to this day. From Marvel to Smash Bros. To League and even Valorant and Counter-Strike.
Can I add something?
Go on.
I also want to say that my introduction to this game was you sending me a video of every single one of Deadpool's voice lines.
By Nolan
And
North.
Yes. Oh God, Nolan North, I love you as Deadpool. Holy crap, he's so good. That man is such a good voice actor.
Absolutely.
He's God. I love him so much. He's like, Jesus Christ, I never ever knew it was him that would voice the video game counterpart of freaking Deadpool. Did he do him in the cartoons too? Please tell me he did.
I believe in some of them, yes.
Okay, thank God. Jesus Christ, like that man has range.
Oh, definitely.
Deadpool basically was my introduction to showing me the range that Nolan North has with every single one of the characters that he portrays. Because, like, literally, the very first time that I ever got introduced to him was for something a whole lot more serious. And then I freaking see that he voices one of the absolute goofiest comic book characters of all time, and he literally sounds like he has so much fun with this role in Marvel vs. Capcom 3. That's not even going into the Deadpool video game either. But here, for this game, when you showed me that video of his voice lines and then what, like, the things that he says, like, after he defeats somebody in a match and such, like, oh my God, it's so good. I will never forget his absolute burn to Dante. I literally think that that's one of the greatest the greatest burns I've ever heard of in my life. I mean, damn.
Wait, which one was that?
Maybe next time you should let Nero do your fighting, Skippy.
Oh, I remember now. Oh, that reminds.
Oh my God.
That reminds me something else about Marvel 3. Is that as of right now, arguably the Steam version is the best version of this game because there is a very active modding community and they added Nero to the game. They modded Nero into the game.
You're freaking kidding me!
Yes, and it is amazing.
Oh, now I wish Deadpool had a voice line for that.
I mean,
what would he say?
they could probably mod that in, but either they would need to hire Nolan North and pay him, or AI voice generation.
Oh my god! But what would Deadpool say though? That's what I want to know. Look. I can imagine him voicing it. I just want to know what he says when he defeats Nero. If this is what he says to Dante after he defeats him, what does he say to Nero?
I mean, I can imagine no, not Dante. I can imagine Deadpool just bragging about him being able to regenerate limbs.
David, you evil genius, you. Oh my god. I'd give you a fist bump for that if I could.
Thank you. I fist bump back.
And just imagine it, just like Baymax. Blah, 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 blah. Oh man, I want to go back and watch that video now. Oh, that was such a good video.
I'll send you the video of Nero, modded Nero later too.
Oh, please, thank you.
But otherwise, you're number 24.
Yes. My number 24. So remember when I told you how, well, obviously you remember, but unless you forgot about it, but how I mentioned that this was my introduction to the overall range for Nolan North's portrayals of his characters, because before then I only knew him for something serious.
Yeah.
Well, this is what I knew him for previously.
Uncharted?
Correct.
I knew it. Okay, which one?
Drake's Fortune, the very first one in the series, and the
Oh.
one that seemingly not enough people talk about, it feels like. Because every single time that people talk about, like, okay, which games in the franchise are the absolute best, they usually point to number 2, or most recently, number 4. Maybe Lost Legacy, but that's only because it's, recency bias, and plus the fact that Nolan North is not actually in it, like Nathan Drake is not in it, so they don't really mention it as much, but as a standalone, it was actually pretty good. However, Drake's Fortune, this was a diamond in the rough for me. Because yes, this game, there are elements of it that are definitely rough. This game was released like all the way back in 2007.
Yes.
One, like, I think, I'm not sure if it was the flagship title for the PS3, but it was definitely one of the launch titles that came, with the release of the PS3. And honestly, the cover for the game was very, very fascinating. There was like this overall like grainy nature to it, the overall look of like a sort of treasure hunter with, like a treasure map sort of thing. Like that was the overall vibe that I got going with it. But I didn't quite know if that was like actually what the game was going to be focused on until I saw my brother play through like the first couple of chapters. Because I think that this game came out, gosh, where was I at? Like in 2007? Was I in elementary school or was I starting middle school? I can barely remember. But
Elementary.
elementary?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So I was very young when this game came out for the very first time. Um, gosh, 2007? The frick? Wait, so oh, holy crap! I was just a kid. I feel so old now. I mean, there's many things that can make you feel so old, but Jesus Christ, now that I put the years into perspective, wow. Anyways, that's beside the point. But oh my gosh, like when I saw my brother play this for the very first time, I loved that this game just kind of like had a grip on my attention because of the manner of storytelling presentation. And it really was incredibly reminiscent of just the overall progression and the cinematography that you would kind of come to expect from like the Indiana Jones movies. And obviously that's not necessarily just because of the fact that this game is, yes, it is very much inspired by Indiana Jones and the overall like treasure hunt experience and such. And also you can see some inspirations from like even Tomb Raider to a degree as well. But like looking back on it, I loved the overall setting. I loved the presentation of like this very tropical island, the all this greenery, the fact that, you know, when I picture treasure hunts, I literally think of like freaking, you know, pirates, like X marks the spot on the map where you could be able to find said treasure. I love the that there were like these sort of like cliches that were being played into it, but the execution of actually going from point A to point Z in the story is a lot more thrilling and even complex than I thought it was gonna be. Because I thought that, you know, treasure hunting experiences were gonna peak with the Indiana Jones franchise. Like anything else that I had ever seen past that point was gonna be like, okay, you know what? Everything is just probably gonna copy it. It'll never reach like those highs for me and such. But no, Naughty Dog went ahead and made something special with this one. You really come to appreciate the people that you meet in this game. Like Nathan Drake's introduction to this is so freaking hilarious. Just like the first line of dialogue that he says, legendary, just legendary. I wish I could. Okay, so just to provide context, Elena Fisher, the TV journalist that is essentially with him as they uncover the overall coffin of Sir Francis Drake. She's basically like documenting the entire thing, and when she notices that Nathan Drake is like trying to like actually force open the coffin that they pulled out from the ocean, she's like, "Are you sure you want to be defiling your ancestors' remains like that?" What's the first line of dialogue that Nathan Drake says? You make it sound so dirty.
Well, got a point.
Oh my god. If you can set the tone from just the first line of dialogue for your character, bingo. Freaking nailed it. They set the tone for what I should expect with Nathan Drake, and I instantly fell in love with the character from that point onward. I cannot tell you just how ingrained Nathan Drake is into like my overall list of favorite protagonists of all time, dude. He is literally like I mentioned Dante in Devil May Cry as one of the most fun, sarcastic and charming characters and just cool overall like characters ever. Drake, he fits into that category supremely well in his own way in such a grounded fashion too that I can't help but just love the guy. Like I literally every single time I play through these games, I think, oh my god, like can this man like literally be like one of my absolute best friends? He's such a freaking nerd. He has some of the funniest things ever to say. I love his humor. He has such a deep loyalty to like the people that he meets in his life. He is very resourceful, very resilient, and just overall just one of the people that you can completely rely on to be there for you. And Naughty Dog really made like quite a legendary character, quite a mascot for the PlayStation with this one. And there's a reason why even to this day people haven't forgotten just how great of a character he is. Even the supporting cast that you see in this game, they're great. Elena Fisher's introduction was really wonderful. Victor Sullivan. The only thing that I can really say like negative about this game is maybe the villain, but that's because I feel like because this was Naughty Dog's first foray into making games on a grander scale with like an actual like story to tell and such, because again, like this is coming from a studio that, you know, made Crash Bandicoot. They transitioned into making, you know, Jack and Daxter with a story that was a whole lot more grander, or grandiose, I should say. Now they have to move onto something that is a lot more grounded and realistic. It's very much a transition from being able to, you know, tell something that is rooted in sci-fi, deep steampunk setting that is very. It's not that easy for like, you know, everybody to be able to really digest. And then moving on to a story that is a lot more reality grounding, like this one. I imagine that must have been kind of not difficult per se, but it must have taken a fair bit to really find your footing and see what direction can work, what characters will allow you to stand out, what twists in the story will make you be memorable to anybody that plays this. The gameplay itself was pretty, it was very basic, and honestly, I would say that that's the roughest part of this game in general. I don't necessarily consider it to be, like, the combat itself, I don't consider it to be my favorite, honestly, just because of how basic it was. The six-axis controls, way back on the PS3 were very, poorly implemented, and I genuinely think that that was something they should have taken out entirely, which I'm glad that they did for the Nathan Drake collection re-released on PS4 and beyond. And I think that like gameplay wise, the only thing that truly stood out to me as part of like a very fun little side activity was the little treasures that are scattered around the world. I loved how I could be able to like come out into like a wide open area, like maybe like a waterfall on the side and like some vines to climb up like in the far corner with beautiful scenery and wonderful like rainforest ambiance. Like, I love that I could be able to like open myself up to just this beautiful view to take in. And then in the corner of my eye, I'll see something just shining, just like a very white, glowy orb just go in and out, in and out. And I'm just thinking, okay, is that like a visual glitch or is that something I can actually go up to and grab? Like, is that like a visual reference? So I go over to it, and lo and behold, it's a treasure. Treasure left behind by whatever civilization, by whatever tribe must have been, you know, like here on an island or on this, like wherever you are. And when you pick it up, it's like one of the most beautifully rendered treasures like ever. It's this like mini game as you're going forth in this treasure hunting experience that really also extends replayability for it because let's be real. On almost nobody's first playthrough of like any of these games are you gonna find everything because these treasures are scattered in some of the wackiest locations that you could possibly imagine, especially as you move forward with this franchise.
Okay, this sounds like Jack 2 and 3 with the precursor orbs.
It really does, and I'm fairly certain that that's what gave Naughty Dog the inspiration to just make this one heck of an like an egg hunt or something. It's like, hey, just find the thing in the most random places and boom, you got it. And these treasures, God, they are so wonderful, dude. And as like a note for like the entire franchise, like I love how these treasures really are very specific to the overall locations that you go through. And yes, there are some Easter egg treasures that Naughty Dog went ahead and just placed in, but these are like you can tell they put in a lot of time and effort into fully creating the weathered look of what these treasures must be like if some lucky soul out there were to literally unearth or find a treasure in like some kind of like a rock crevice or something. It was incredibly well done on the PS3 and I legitimately loved it for that. the progression of the story was very nice. I honestly don't think that it was rushed in any particular sequence. Uh, some of the visual designs for, like, let's say explosions, they look incredibly goofy, and I think that that must have been one of the graphical downgrades that Naughty Dog just kind of like had to deal with. Thankfully, things got better as the series progressed and such, but it's one of those glaring things that I cannot ignore, like, visually speaking. That and, like I mentioned before, the villains themselves, they weren't particularly memorable. Only one of them was kind of funny for some voice dialogues and such, but I can't deny that the only thing that saves these villains is the voice acting for the game. Like, we know time and time again, Nolan North practically can do no wrong. Like, he's just that good of a voice actor. Um, what was her name? Emily Rose, I think, or suddenly I forgot the voice actress for Helena Fisher herself. I can barely pronounce the man for Victor Sullivan, but basically, there's not a single bad voice actor for any of the cast in this game, even for the enemies that you fight. The sound design is wonderful. The locations were wonderfully rendered, made even better on the Nathan Drake collection. The music and the birth of Nathan Drake's theme for the overall Uncharted franchise. I don't think people give this man enough credit, but holy crap. This has got to be one of the best soundtracks ever that I've ever had the pleasure of listening to. Every single time I go through a section that has some significant story progression, I get the literal freaking chills, dude. This is one of those instances where I just have to wonder how the heck are people able to make something so chilling, and do they know what they've accomplished? Do they know that it's going to have this kind of effect on the audience?
That's a question for every music composer in the games industry, I swear.
Seriously. God, like, Uncharted Drake's Fortune is where the game started. I'm not even sure. I genuinely don't know if, like, Naughty Dog was truly aware that they had a solid foundation for what would later become one of the most recognizable gaming franchises out there. Because I think at the time of its release, people mostly gave this game like either sevens or 8 out of 10s. Maybe some of them might have given them, like, 9 out of 10s when it first came out and such. But I think overall, most people nowadays would give it like a 7 or an 8. I'm more so leaning towards like a pretty solid 8 out of 10 for me, just because my biggest gripes are some visual. Uh,
Clarity?
I'm not sure if clarity is the right word. I would say more like animations. I didn't like animations for certain effects that happen on screen. It just looks goofy and very cartoony as heck. And it does kind of like take you out of the overall realism that the game has tried so hard and yet kind of executed pretty wonderfully to set up. And I don't like the villains. I'm pretty sure that they just wanted to go with like a classic villain overall to just make it easier for, normal audience to digest this very first game that Naughty Dog has made since the days of the Jack and Daxter series, which I can understand, but it's still just a personal gripe of mine. But everything else, the characters, the story, the setting, and I haven't even touched upon the fact that the twist of enemies that show up in this game, the way that this game introduces supernatural into the real world setting is fantastic. I genuinely believe that in terms of like the supernatural threats that we see within the overall Uncharted series itself, this is my favorite. This is the one that makes me get goosebumps every single time. There is a very specific line that Nathan Drake says in the second to last chapter, I believe, like literally one cutscene away from the very last chapter, that gives me the chills every single time. It makes me just drop my jaw. It makes me feel in the moment like my stomach just sank. It's that good, and it doesn't help that Nolan North's delivery of it is just so on point. I genuinely feel the fear. God, that game was so wonderful for it. As a closing statement for Uncharted Drake's Fortune, I understand that this game is probably going to be like at the bottom of a lot of people's games for the overall franchise, but that does not mean that it's a bad game, because every single one of the games in this franchise, every one of them is good. It just it really boils down to people's enjoyment overall for this. I personally still hold Uncharted Drake's Fortune. I'm pretty sure I've said this in a live stream, but I want to say I still hold it at number 1 for me, despite it being the roughest.
It's a starting point for greater things that were to come after.
I like it the most for its overall setting, the progression of events, the twists, and the puzzles that you solve. And just the fact that literally at the halfway point of the game, the color palette literally changes, and therefore so does the tone of the story. And I'm just like, the execution of this was just so freaking masterful. It really did plant. It was just another like another place for Naughty Dog to truly cement themselves as masterful storytellers. I still maintain that to this day. Like, everybody, if you guys have not played Uncharted Drake's Fortune, if you haven't watched the playthrough of it, please do. It's entertaining from start to finish. You won't be disappointed.
I remember during the pandemic when PlayStation gave out the Uncharted collection for free.
Yes. I think that was one of the smartest things that they've done, because this game kind of sort of argue that it's like one of the most interactive like movies to play, just because of the fact that they literally designed this to be, like to feel like you're playing through a movie.
You're playing Indiana Jones, the unofficial video game.
Or what do you call it? The spiritual successor?
That's probably a better way of saying it.
Yeah, the spiritual successor to Indiana Jones. And it worked. And with that, what is your number 25?
Okay, so the final slot on this final row. Admittedly, I think. Okay, I know. I don't think. I know. I need to replay this game because I remember enjoying it, but I don't remember exactly why. And that is Xenoblade Chronicles, the very first one.
I haven't heard you talk about this game in years. It feels like.
Oh, you should hear my squeals of joy when Xenoblade Chronicles was shown to be remade for the Nintendo Switch. Because the moment I heard those piano keys, I immediately knew. I knew what it was. I do remember two things about Xenoblade that I'm very, very fond of. Well, for number one is the music, because
I freaking knew you were going to say that.
Because Yoko Shimomura, musical genius. Okay, well, it was her and a few other composers, admittedly.
So that's the reason why you used the God, what was that song called again? The Gar Plains, the night version of it or something. You use that
Plains.
for. Yeah, you used that for our OST game, like, way back in the day. I still remember it. I still listen to it every so often, ever since you sent it. Yeah, it's good. It's good. I still remember really the story that I wrote for it. Heck, I still remember what you wrote for it, too.
It's been so long, even I don't remember.
Well, you have me. And I also have, an active archive of the stories that we wrote for that OST game. So there you go.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, the second thing about Xenoblade is the world building. This is not a spoiler since you learned this in like the first 3 minutes of the game. But literally, the world that you explore is legitimately on two titans that were locked in battle for eons, and they are now presumably dead. And somehow,
Jesus.
and somehow these two titans birth life. You, the main cast of characters, you actually travel up one of these titans and even cross over to the other one. And it's one of those things where I just stand back for a moment, and I ask myself, how many games does world building like this? Because it doesn't matter if it's literature, film, or video games. A lot of the times the world, it's usually an island, a country, a continent, maybe even an entire fictional planet. But here, I don't even know what a planet is in this universe. All I know is that there's two colossal beings standing in a gargantuous ocean, and both of them gave life. I don't even want to think about what's beyond those two dead titans. And frankly, the different environments and terrains you explore on these two beings, it's quite astounding. It's got mountains, it's got rivers, it's got caves with waterfalls, it's got everything. You kind of forget that you're traveling up essentially a giant corpse.
I'm literally trying to imagine that in my mind, and the heck?
It's great.
I'm fascinated.
It's a bit funny because as I said, it blends so well that you kind of forget you're traveling up you forget that you're traveling up the dead body of a giant titan. But you do get reminded when you jump over a cliff and it turns out, oh hey, you were on the shoulder. Now you've fallen back onto like its knee or something, and you took like maximum fall damage.
Oh god.
Yeah, there goes my fear of heights.
Okay, now I understand why it's so ingrained with you. That's definitely one way to put it. Holy crap. God, I'm picturing that in my mind, and oh man, I don't like it.
Wait, which part?
I really don't.
What, jumping off a cliff, or just the fact that you're traveling up a dead body?
Jumping off a cliff.
Okay, that's understandable.
Oh man, bro, why?
Because of reasons.
Great. Well, wonderful reasons. Thanks very much.
Yeah, I'm glad that this game got a Nintendo Switch remaster. With how popular the Switch is, it's far more accessible. Because before the Switch version, it was initially on the Wii, and there was very few copies of this game. In fact, it was initially only released in Europe and Japan, but eventually it did come over to the States, and yeah, it was a rarity at that time.
Wow.
Yeah, and it did get a second re-release for specifically the new 3DS, which was a very specific 3DS with like a hardware upgrade, and one of the few games that was meant to take advantage of said hardware upgrade was Xenoblade. But yeah, I would say as of right now, the Switch version is the most accessible, and plus, it added a new piece of content that was, I don't remember if it was cut out of the original game or if it was just never finished.
When is this new piece of content?
I forget what it's called. Hold on, it's actually on here on the website. Future Connected. It's not a DLC, but it is like a post game epilogue.
I was gonna ask if it was like anything story related, but if that's the case, post game epilogue. As always, like you're my introduction to these games, and yes, I'm pretty certain that the only other source that I could have possibly been exposed to for Xenoblade, I want to say, was Watch Mojo, because back in the day I used to watch so many of their lists and such, especially for like video game and anime related,
You and
items
me,
and
you and
such.
me both.
I stopped watching them like a long time ago,
Oh, well,
but
same.
for me, aside from them, you were technically the very first person to expose me to that game overall, and it was specifically that piece of music that you used for our OST game, and I think that from there, it kind of sort of snowballed into, like, this increasing interest into what exactly it could be, because isn't one of those, weapons that you wield, like, also one of the most, memorable weapons in gaming as well, or am I thinking of something else?
So I think that's debatable, but otherwise, I think people are familiar with the Minato. I think they just recognize, oh hey, it's that red sword, that red lightsaber thingy mabob. But I don't think people know it for what it is, what it's actually called, and what game it came from.
Okay. Well, for me, now I'm able to recognize it because you introduced it to me, but yeah, like, um, I've been curious for, like, seeing what this game is about, but I kind of held off on it just because I felt like this is probably one of those experiences that would be best, suited to actually going through and playing it rather than just reading some summary of it or maybe even watching a YouTuber,
I would say so.
like, just kind of, I guess, give an overall summary of what events occurred in this game. So yeah, I definitely felt like, okay, I feel like I have to respect this title and just see if it's even remotely possible. I'll see if maybe there is some way I could be able to play it.
Don't get me wrong, Chugga Conroy he did a very fun and also very informative playthrough of Xenoblade 1. But my goodness, that one is lengthy. Xenoblade is not a short game.
I imagined that would be the case. Should I watch it, or do you think there might be a chance for me to play it?
I
Because
think
if
I
it
think
is
I think
as
there's a chance for you to play it.
you think so,
Yes.
okay, I will hold off on this informative playthrough of his until I get my hands on it.
Okay, now get over here. I can lend you my Nintendo Switch and also my copies of the Kingdom Hearts HD collection.
Right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So that was your number 25, huh?
Very much. I
That
think
was a heck.
yeah, I think this is one that after a second playthrough, I think this one could potentially move up to my top 5, if not maybe like into a top 10, but hey, we're doing this list top 5 and everything else alphabetical order.
Yes, that's true.
All right. So, final slot on the final row.
Oh
what is your
boy.
final game?
Okay, this one, I kind of have to admit, it was something of a mix of, okay, does this actually, like, should this actually be on here in terms of a top 25, or is this, am I just including it because I wanted to respect it? I have debated that for the absolute longest time, but to be perfectly honest, I feel like I needed to include it on here because it was something of a turning point for me in terms of how grim things can get for a beloved character that I really, really have like such emotional attachment to. And that is Uncharted 3 Drake's Deception.
Really?
Fun fact and fun trivia. Uncharted 3 Drake's Deception, at the time of its release, was actually at the bottom of my list for games that I legitimately enjoyed from, top to bottom of Uncharted.
Mm-hmm.
I can't say that I hated it or anything, but I didn't like it because I thought that the story was too dark. I didn't like how grim, how personal things had gotten for Nathan Drake in this story. I didn't like that there were now like actual emotional tensions between him, the people in his life. I didn't like that there was a villain that basically knew things about him that made him so much more vulnerable as a character. I wanted it to maintain that I guess that adventurous tone that the first two games had wonderfully set up. And it was because of that that for the longest time it had been at the bottom of my list. But then as the years started going by and the more I started to play the game and the more games that I started exposing myself to, especially for storytelling, the more I realized I was such a damn fool. How could I have placed such a game like this at the bottom of my list? If anything, it would be either at the top or at number 2. I realized at a certain point, you can't expect your main character to be so perfect. There has to be some kind of a flaw to them, and it's kind of unfortunate that, you know, having gone for 2 games, Naughty Dog never really explored the possibility that Nathan Drake could be a flawed. There's only one instance. There's only one instance where they microscopically explore the possibility that, you know, maybe Nathan Drake is not a is not a good person underneath. And that's when a main villain calls him out for how many men of his that he's killed in just one day.
Oh, that's a good point.
Exactly. Exactly. And I'm like,
Sir, they shot at me first. I was acting in
yeah,
self-defense.
you know, Kratos would absolutely side with him on that. Yeah, aside from that one moment in the second game, Naughty Dog never truly explored more of his character, to be honest. Like, we only ever focus on the treasure hunting, the history that is, I guess, told to us throughout the course of the cinematics and throughout the course of the environments that we go through, the treasures, some of the optional dialogue that you can, you know, kind of see every so often. And yeah, like when Uncharted 3 came out, I really was incredibly unappreciative of the the vulnerability that we'd been exposed to for Nathan Drake. And like I mentioned before, having had the opportunity to go through and play through a whole lot more games, and especially with the Final Fantasy games that you've shown me and Persona as well, like I'd really grown to appreciate just how characters don't have to be so one dimensional, how they can be flawed, how they can like really overcome the odds. And it's like forget how to pronounce the dragon's name in Skyrim. I think he's essentially the final boss, the one dragon that the freaking voice actor for Mario
Oh, Charles
voiced.
Martinet.
Yeah, what's his name? Pantherax, I
I don't.
think.
I forgot, but I know who you're talking about.
He says something along the lines. I'm gonna butcher his quote. Actually, you know what? Screw it. I really do not want to butcher that quote.
What is better, to be born good or to overcome your evil nature through great effort?
There you go. It was that one. Like that overall journey of overcoming that vulnerability. Uncharted Drake's deception really does that for me. Like this was the point in the game where you really start to see the consequences of Nathan Drake's treasure hunting. It has almost irreparably damaged his relationship with his closest friends. It has gotten him to a point where he has become obsessed with the thrill of the hunt, where literally he will think about nothing else but the competition to get to that destination first. where he is so unbelievably entranced in learning and teaching the history of the treasure that they're going after, or the lost city that they're going after. He is literally, his entire mindset is solely focused on that it gets to a point where he's pretty much willing to sacrifice his old man friend. Like, it's basically like that overall mindset of like, oh my god, you get keep up with me or get left behind. Like, it's that overall mindset that really makes you see Nathan Drake in such a different light, because he is so unbelievably focused on the treasure hunt that he he loses sight of the people that matter most to him in his life. And the words that his companions will say to him, the turning points in which he realizes what he has lost, what he could potentially lose more if he doesn't stop, coupled with the fact that they have fantastic direction with the cutscenes. And the voice acting at that point had become so much more unbelievably refined with such beautiful dialogue. It makes you feel every single bit of emotion, and it truly makes you appreciate just how far Naughty Dog has come to creating such a real and grounded character like Nathan Drake. I didn't like it before because, like I said, I didn't like having to see the flaws in who I consider to be one of my favorite characters, but over time, with more and more playthroughs, I came to that realization that that's human. We're all human. We have our obsessions, and if you don't learn to let go, if you don't learn to mediate that, or if you don't learn to really appreciate what it is that you've got, you will lose everything. And this has become such an embodiment for that in some very trippy ways too, but in also some very downright realistically scary portrayals as well, that I just like it sticks with me. This was also my introduction to one of those characters that really knows how to mess you up psychologically. Like, dag nabbit, the villains in this game, they freaking hate them with all my heart and soul. I didn't think that this game would have such an impact on me in terms of my overall views for that kind of storytelling, but it definitely was like one of the points that really made me realize I don't think I gave this game enough credit, and I think I probably have to include it on this list because of that realization. I love Nathan Drake. I love the Uncharted franchise for introducing us to this wonderful blend of real world with supernatural threats, and just the realistic twist that comes with each one of them. The fantastic puzzles. This was probably the first time in the series where I actually needed a guide to help me solve one puzzle, because it was just that complicated and that bizarre to me. I needed outside help for the very first time. The voice acting, the music, the overall setting, the treasures, the combat was so much more refined, especially in the melee department. And gosh, I didn't even mention this before, but the fact that they kept a multiplayer with this, and they had gotten a lot more refined into where you could be able to like make your own emblems, you could be able to customize your own character with your own clothing and such. Like, it God, the multiplayer for Uncharted is so underrated, but it was so much fun.
I didn't know this game had multiplayer.
It started with Uncharted 2. I played Uncharted 2 to hell and back. Uncharted 3 was a little bit more refined, and it had arguably some of my more favorite weapons to use ever in the game, and God, it was just so good. I don't think things ever became the same for me after Uncharted 4. Uncharted 3 was where it peaked for me, for sure. And not to mention the fact that this was where Naughty Dog introduced the whole Uncharted TV or something. It's like this little like mini TV that you could see like in the bottom right hand corner where if you click on it to enlarge, it'll give you like updates on the projects that they're working on.
Really?
Yeah, it'll show you even like teaser trailers of games that they have upcoming of like new stuff. This was actually the very first time that I was able to see the teaser trailer for The Last of Us. I honestly thought to myself, wait, this is Naughty Dog's next project after Drake's Deception? They're actually going into a full-blown apocalypse.
It's a very big contrast from Uncharted.
Definitely. But gosh darn it, dude. That the main campaign. I mentioned I put so much attention on how Drake himself really is quite the changed person in this entry. And I wish I could be able to talk more about like the side characters, but that would be going a little bit into like spoiler territory and such. And I don't want to do that for anybody that hasn't played the games, but I genuinely think that there's like hardly really any particular bad element for Uncharted, like Drake's Deception. The only thing that I could might maybe think of is just the overall continuation of that stupid artificial difficulty with like crushing difficulty and such. Because honestly, the Uncharted games are like the definition of artificial difficulty. It's just it's kind of not that innovative and very basic and completely unfair. But other than that, like I don't think I remember any particular like really truly bad flaw with Drake's Deception. I guess theoretically be a perfect game or at the very least close to being a near perfect game, honestly.
Or a flawed masterpiece.
Maybe that too. I think that that could also be a worthy title for this game.
Because my feed occasionally gets recommends me videos about, oh, this piece of media is a quote unquote flawed masterpiece, and a lot of these flawed masterpieces that people are talking about, like they are really really good. Ranging from Spider-Verse to Bloodborne and Majora's Mask. It's like, hey, here's these things that are very close to quote unquote perfect.
Is it
Just
always like the one aspect that like holds it back from being completely perfect?
yes.
Of course. Okay. Then yeah, I guess
Like
I
maybe
I
maybe maybe
guess
oh, maybe like one big one and then like two minor ones, but the two minor ones are so minor that and there's no point in complaining about it.
I guess maybe you could potentially say that about Uncharted, honestly. Again, for me personally, I just don't like how artificial the difficulty gets like when you go up difficulty levels and such. I think that that's just pretty stupid. And not to mention the fact that like with the Uncharted Drake or no, rather Nathan Drake collection, they added brutal. Jesus Christ. If you really want to suffer, go ahead and play through those, but I attempted that with Drake's Fortune. I had barely made it to like chapter 4, I think, the start of it on there, and it's so freaking ridiculous, dude. I hate it.
Were the enemies given aimbot?
Yes,
Okay, that explains a lot.
I take more damage. They take less damage. I feel like that might be the core of it actually. It's just it's difficult for the sake of being difficult. It's so artificial. It's stupid. There's no innovation for it, and it's as far as Naughty Dog's willing to go in order to just make it a replayable thing, I guess. I don't know.
Put some trophies for completing said difficulty.
Which is really the only reason for why I will even consider going back and playing brutal difficulty for any one of these games, but I digress. It's there, it's tempting me. It's the trophy hunter nature for me. So, also, I forgot to add this bit of trivia for Uncharted Drake's Fortune, so I'll just put it on here. But that game had the honor of being my very first platinum trophy ever. I felt so accomplished after that.
Did you steal it from Nathan?
I stole a platinum trophy?
From Nathan Drake.
Either that, or he handed it to me.
I don't think I'll question why he just handed you a platinum trophy.
Being like, you've made it. Here you go.
Congratulations.
Look, I'm not a thief. I'd like to think I'm not a thief. I may be a fellow trophy hunter that could technically qualify as a treasure hunter, but I'm not stealing it from anybody, I think. No, you know what? I earned it. I put myself through that hell. I hated crushing difficulty for every single one of these Uncharted games. It's so stupid. I earned it. He gives it to me.